Welcome back to That's Business podcast. Today's guest, we have Abby Center. Abby's a licensed real estate agent with Dobie in Birmingham with over 3 years of experience. She works in Macomb, Oakland, and Lapeer counties. When working with her residential clients, she takes a personable and educational approach. She's passionate about fitness, yoga, and traveling. I'm so excited to have Abby on this podcast with the craziness that is the real estate world. So Abby, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited.
I'm so excited. So tell us first and foremost, how the hell did you get into real estate?
So before getting into real estate, I was working at a law firm. I actually started working there when I was 16.
Wow.
And I remember like applying for the job and being like, I'm never going to get this job. But I was like, I'm 16. This is a big law firm. This is not going to happen.
Right.
But I remember a good family friend encouraged me. He's like, what do you have to lose? Like the worst thing they can say is no. Right. So
Right.
I'm really grateful for that encouragement because that just kind of launched my career. So yeah, I started there when I was 16 and then I was promoted there to contract support specialist. And I worked in that position for a number of years. And essentially it was kind of like a paralegal. So assisting the lawyers in editing the contracts, corresponding with clients. And I did really like that position. I feel like it fit me for the time being, but there wasn't like too much growth opportunity from there besides going to law school. And I did not want to do that. Shout out to the lawyers, but not for me. So I kind of started looking for something different. I wanted it to be a little bit more interactive with clients.
Sure.
And so at that same time, my husband and I, Josh, now husband, I think we were engaged at the time, we were looking for our first house. And the real estate agent we worked with, he was a broker and owner of his own brokerage. And so we, went through the process of buying a house and I don't know, it just really attracted me. So I started talking to him about like, what would this look like getting into real estate? Do you have a position for me on the management side? And so in April of 2019, I transitioned out of the legal field into real estate. I started working for him on the management side, assisting the agents with background work, doing onboarding, recruiting agents, all of that. And then I started studying for the real estate exam and got my license. And I was just doing it part-time. And then I realized that I really like this sales thing. Like this seems like it fits me. So I decided to go into sales full-time, drop like the management side of it. And I moved to a new brokerage where I'm now at Dobie Real Estate in Birmingham. And last year, which would be 2021, was my first year as a full-time sales agent. And I reached my goals. I over tripled my business from what I was doing. Yeah. As a part-time agent, a lot of growth to happen, but super excited about, where I've come so far. So that's a little bit about how I got into the madness of real estate.
What a good year to get into it, huh? No kidding.
Yeah. It was pretty wild.
Right? Now, what's going into where we're at with this pandemic, what kind of happened? Because I don't feel like a lot of people like really understand like this whole market, what's going on with real estate. And what do you think happened 2020, 2021, and especially seeing it firsthand?
Yeah. So, when in real estate, we definitely got shut down for a short period of time, not to the extent that like a lot of other industries did. It was, I think it was like 4 weeks maybe that we weren't allowed to show houses, and then open house, we slowly transitioned into open houses. But as far as launching us into this crazy market that everyone's hearing about, interest rates just went so low, like historical lows. We were getting interest rates at like 2.5, 2.6. Even when we first bought our house in 2019, I think our interest rate was close to a 5%. So, which is still, generally pretty low.
Okay.
But these were like historical lows. So everyone that was trying to buy a house, even if they were planning on waiting, they were like, well, I'm going to do it now, So,
Yep.
um, I mean, all these buyers just launched into the market. And on the flip side, I mean, there just wasn't enough inventory to sustain the buyers. And we're still seeing that to this day.
Right.
And so just an overabundance of buyers, not enough listings. And I mean, it still is multiple offers on every single house, going well over asking price. And so we're seeing interest rates go up a little bit. They've gone up
Mhm.
over the last couple weeks. We're not seeing those like mid twos anymore. They're closer to 5%, which I think a lot of buyers are kind of freaking out, like, oh my gosh, the interest rates just shot up. But still, historically speaking, they're honestly really low. We just got really, really spoiled with like the 2.6% interest rate. Like money is free. Right? So,
Just take it.
um, yeah.
Right. And what kind of goes into interest rates? Is it more like market demand or how? Because I mean, and I don't know as much about real estate as you do, obviously, but what goes into like what percentage interest rates are decided?
Um, so that would be a good question for a loan officer. They definitely know the fine details,
Oh,
but
okay.
how like they are affected, like for example, one of my loan officers I work with, he's like, yeah, anytime Kim Jong-un like threatens America, like interest rates go super low. So like any
Oh,
world
okay.
events that are kind of happening, like that can really affect. So like the pandemic really affected it because the economy went kind of crazy, with businesses being
Right.
shut down. So they were trying to, encourage people to take out loans.
Hmm.
And now I think, they're trying to come back from that because, inflation is super high. So the rise in interest rates, that really helps off balance, some of the inflation. So
I never looked at it that way, but that does make sense.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. What are you seeing in this market now? I know you just said it's still multiple offers, it's still craziness. Is it as bad as it was in 20 or what are you kind of seeing currently?
So, to be honest with you, I kind of think this market is even worse than
Oh,
2020
that's
and
good.
2021, just in the sense of, what the like what we have on the market. So, right now,
Right.
like for a healthy market, a quote unquote healthy market, it would be like 6 to 8 months worth of inventory on the market. And right now, at least in, the Metro Detroit area, right now we're sitting at like zero point 0.3 months worth of inventory.
Oh.
So yeah, like we've definitely seen a lot more come to market in the spring. We're kind of mid spring market, but it's still a very very slow spring. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm at least hopeful. So like
That's good.
for the beginning of the year, I was going out with clients seeing like one house here, one house there. And now over the last couple weekends, I've been going out with each client seeing like 4 or 5 houses. Like there's definitely more available. Um, but still it's not where, we want it to be. And there's definitely less inventory than, what we were seeing in past years.
Oh my gosh. It is crazy because my boyfriend and I are like, we sold our house. We in an apartment right now looking again just to see when something hits, but it's so crazy. It's like I will go on the MLS listings we have and they'll be like, oh, there's nothing new. I'm like, this is just crazy.
Yeah.
But oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
No,
it's
it's
insane.
definitely tough. I mean, I just sold my old house and bought a new house, and we kind of, swooped right in where we got a really low interest rate. But yeah, no, it definitely is pretty crazy for buyers out there. I don't want to discourage them. Like you can still buy. I just got a buyer under contract last week. Like you can still
Woohoo.
do it, but you just
Right.
have to, set the expectation of kind of like what you should expect and what the reality of the market is right now.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, when your clients are looking for houses, and I've seen people like online argue about this, does someone need to get pre-approved before looking at houses? Or what goes into that?
Absolutely. So The pre-approval process, it's interesting because a lot of people that want to buy a house, like the first thing they do is go to their agent, which definitely, do that. Talk to your agent about, hey, I'm interested in purchasing a house or, selling my
Right.
house. But um, they will then, direct you either to a preferred loan officer or, mortgage broker. And if you have someone that you would like to work with, that's great. But you definitely want to get pre approved. And basically, what that means is you're going to a loan officer and they're kind of taking, a snapshot view of your finances, going to the bank and saying, like, hey, how much,
Hey,
how much
look.
would you be willing to, what's that?
I said, hey, look. Yeah.
Yeah. How much would you be willing to, loan to this person? And then, they'll come back with a number, let's say 400,000, and you get that pre-approval letter saying, hey, Angela Bucciolato is pre-approved up to $400,000.
Mhm.
Um, and the purpose of that is you have already kind of done the back end work to start securing that loan.
Okay.
You haven't actually applied for it, but you do need that pre-approval letter when you are submitting an offer on a home. So it's just kind of doing steps in the right order, right? So like if
Right.
you want to go see houses and you're not pre-approved, you might find one that you really love. In this market, you have to jump on it and put an offer in that day. But if you're not pre-approved, you have to go back to the loan officer. It could take a couple days to get you pre-approved. So it's just taking the right steps to be properly prepared in order to go see houses and submit an offer, because you will need to submit that letter when you write an offer.
Now, that kind of goes into the next question, but what's a mistake you're seeing from both buyers and sellers? I'm guessing that not getting pre-approved is one of them, but what
Mhm.
mistakes are you seeing from both on both sides of it?
So buyers, I would say couple things, like not having the right expectations. Part of
Okay.
that is, kind of adjusting your mindset, but also having the right agent that is going to educate you and help prepare you for what you're about to step into in this market.
For sure.
So, wanting certain things in your home, like, 3 bed, 2 bath, I need a finished basement. This needs to be perfectly updated, but this is my price point. And being realistic about what you can actually get for the price point that you're looking in, and maybe adjusting and being like, hey, well, maybe we can't get these updates in this price point, but you can make these updates later. But can
Right.
you build a garage? No. Like, just making adjustments that are appropriate. And
Hmm.
then, also for sellers, I would say um couple things. People are now finally hearing about, like, oh my gosh, my neighbor sold my house for this much, or like my friend sold his house for this much. And yes, that's happening. However, you still need to price your home right. So
Hmm.
like, yeah, you might want 450 for your house because that's what your neighbor got for his house, but we don't want to price at 450 because you're just going to scare people away. You still
Right.
want to price your home according to market value, and if not, a little bit on the lower end, because you want to create a bidding war. And I kind of like educate them and give them the example of an auction. Like, we're selling this picture for
Right.
$5. Well, everyone wants it for $5. So, it's going to create a bidding war and you're going to end up getting $25 for it. It's the same concept with, pricing your home right. You want to list at market value, preferably slightly a little bit lower, and then create that bidding war, and you end up getting $30,000 more for your house because people are willing to fight for it.
Jeez.
Yeah. And
Now,
like, I mean, same thing would go with the buyer. Like if your max price point is 400,000, don't start looking at homes that are set at 400,000. Like,
right.
let's backpedal about $30,000, start there, and then that way you can actually compete, with the other buyers in that home, because everything is really pretty much for the most part going up over asking.
Jeez. Now, just because we just went through this process and I got asked a lot, are people writing letters or besides obviously monetary, like, yeah, I'll give you 30 grand over asking price and that's
Right.
really attractive. What other things are buyers doing to get the seller to go with their offer? What have you seen with your clients?
Oh, all kinds of things. People are getting very creative.
Oh,
So I have seen people offer like, here's $100 to the seller for like, congratulations on your closing lunch. So like, here's $100 towards beer and pizza.
okay.
Um, I heard of someone in this area writing, they saw a house and they saw that the seller had a Peloton in their house, and so they wrote into the offer and offered to pay for the seller's like year-long subscription to Peloton.
What?
Like super creative.
That is creative, but what?
Yeah. Um, so just kind of throwing in, extra things outside of what you can, negotiate with the actual terms of the contract. Some
Right,
people are waiving their inspections, which personally I do not like to encourage my clients to do that.
right.
If you want to do that, you're welcome
Great.
to, but is never my recommendation. You never know what you're walking into in a home. And I mean, one way, rather than waiving your inspection, what you could say is, hey, this, I'm still going to get the inspection done, but it's going to be a pass or fail inspection. Like it's for informational purposes for us as the buyers only. We're not going to come back and ask you to fix up all these things. But so
Oh,
people are
that's
doing
smart.
that.
Yeah.
But as far as like your question about the letters are kind of tricky because I have had buyers do it, but it can be like it's always it's kind of a little shady as far as like ethics go, because you are I don't know, you're exposing yourself to the sellers on like who you are, what
Right.
potentially like your familial status is, what potentially your religion is, like different things like that. And
For
so
sure.
it can be a little bit risky to do that, as far as, you know, just having certain biases toward people.
For
So
sure.
every agent is different whether they recommend that or not, but it is not as preferred.
Not preferred. I can't
Yeah.
get over that Peloton subscription. I'm just thinking about
I
that.
know.
That's
I'm like, that's
adorable.
very smart. Good for you. So, yeah,
No
people are getting
kidding.
so creative with like what they're doing. Or like, I've heard of people offering, they see that they have like dog stuff in the house. And so, like,
Mhm.
offering to, like pay for a dog sitter or pay for a babysitter for you guys to go out to dinner. Like, just
Wow.
wild, super, super creative stuff to put you over the edge. Yeah.
Now, what are some of the red flags when looking at a house? Or when you walk into this house, are you like, wow, this is a huge red flag? Or what does that look like for, I know there's
Yeah.
5 million things, but what are like
Right.
what are the, like the top five or like people should be
Yeah.
looking for?
Yeah. So I would always say try to really focus on the big things like
Okay.
foundational issues, roof, like high price point items, AC, furnace, hot water heater, especially in Michigan. In certain areas in the Metro Detroit area, foundational issues are going to be the biggest thing because, like we've experienced in like Royal Oak and Ferndale, crazy
Yes.
flooding, stuff like that. And if there are water issues in the basement or the sellers have experienced water, they are required to disclose that. But really checking out a lot of the major foundational things and high price point items like the roof, hot water heater, furnace, etc.
Mhm.
Because you might walk in and see a beautiful home, but if everything else is falling apart, like we call it lipstick on a pig. So like
Yes.
you don't want to be purchasing a house where it's like, oh my gosh, these white granite countertops, but then your roof is going to be leaking, or you have to replace the furnace and a hot
Mhm.
water heater in a year. And if you're good with kind of taking on that risk and putting that money towards your home, that's totally okay. But just kind of being aware of that you're not walking into, a potentially crappy situation where you're dumping all your money towards that. And again, like that's where the inspection comes in handy. Like some of those things we can see, but like
Right.
when I show a house, I'm not going up into the attic and seeing if there's proper insulation or if there's
Oh,
mold
of
up there,
course. Right.
so the inspector will, they'll help. highlight that for the buyers. So I would say those are kind of the big things, because you can always update a home.
Right.
But do you want to be spending your money on stuff that isn't pretty?
No, you don't. One thing that
No.
when I bought my 100-year-old house in Royal Oak,
Oh
something
wow.
I never thought about was, and I was first time home buyer. I was so excited. I
Mhm.
was like, oh, I'm right out of college. I'm good to go. So pumped. But one thing I wish I would have done, two things. It was like turn on every light, which
Mhm.
I've
Yep.
heard that, and I think you and I have talked about that, or check out the house when it's raining, because
Yes.
I didn't do that and my basement
Mhm.
flooded and the seller didn't disclose that. But
Yeah.
what are some of those other things that are like obvious to you? Like you have your checklist in your head with your buyers, like I need to do this, and that, but obviously you're not in the attic, like you said, but what are some
Right.
easier things people can do too?
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely when you're walking into the house, like you want to turn on all the lights. It could be
Mhm.
that like the light bulb is out, right?
Right, for sure.
But even like flushing the toilets, making sure the toilets are flushing properly.
Oh, that's a good one.
If you do happen to go out on a day that it's raining, that is a great way to see, like, not only if there's flooding in the basement, but seeing if there's flooding, around the home itself.
Sure. Mhm.
And you can also see that too in the winter. Like, I remember going to see this one house. It was probably 10 degrees outside, and
Ooh.
the entire driveway and entire backyard leading up to the garage was probably like 3 to 4 inches thick of ice. And
Oh,
so
that's a problem.
clearly, yeah, like
Mhm.
clearly there was a major flooding issue, and that all just froze, So it's like, okay, we would need to address that. So things like that. But one thing too, as far as like, I know you had kind of a crappy experience with like having the sellers not properly disclose that the basement flooded.
Right.
One way to check that I always like to check, to see if they have potentially had water damage down there, because you can't always tell with the walls or the molding if they've
For
replaced
sure.
it. Is look underneath the stairs, because in the basement, because
Oh.
typically underneath the stairs you'll see, like, the wood framing, and
Mhm.
typically stairs are never really moved or replaced.
Right.
So you can kind of go underneath the stairs and look at the bottom of the step and see, like, hey, is there like water damage underneath here? So that's one of my tips I learned from an inspector. Good to know. And then, like, if you're looking at some type of house like a bungalow where, there's access to the attic, you'll have, a small door where you see into a portion of the attic, that's where you can see if there's enough insulation. You always want to make sure there's insulation backed on the door, so
Mhm.
cold air isn't seeping through. I always try to take my hand, like, around the windows and check to see if especially if it's on a cold day, if there's any, water or air leaks, if you can feel cold kind of coming through the windows. Check the windows for any, like ice buildup or water buildup, things like
Right.
that.
Those are all good ones. I didn't think of those ones. Those are good. I have to know, what is the worst house you've seen? I know I'm sure there's a bunch, but what was something that was just like jaw to the floor, like what am I looking at?
so there was this house. It was a duplex, so it
Okay.
was, like one house that they kind of broke into two and were
Sure.
renting both sides out. And we walked in, and there was a man sleeping on the couch. Um,
Okay.
there were like alcohol bottles everywhere, dirty dishes piled up everywhere. It was honestly like really heartbreaking. But like, I don't know, it's funny because you don't really think of real estate as this like high risk job,
For
like
sure.
you're
Right.
selling houses, but really, like, when you're walking into these houses, you have no idea what you're walking into.
Right.
Like, there could be squatters in there could be people in there, and like we weren't expecting the tenant to be there, but he was just kind of, chilling on the couch. And so, yeah, you definitely have to be careful walking into some houses, because there could be floorboards missing. Like, I've experienced that.
Oh, that's
So
good.
interesting. Or a dog home. Like my thing that I kind of is my pet peeve is people will leave not specifically dogs but mostly cats. They'll leave
Okay.
their cats home, the sellers, and they'll just put a note on the door like, "Hey, the cat's inside, don't let it out." And I'm like, why
No,
is
with
this
that
my
responsibility,
responsibility?
right?
I know.
Like,
Like, what if I let your cat out? I've heard of agents that accidentally let cats out. They run through the door and they're like, I'm chasing this cat around the neighborhood. Like, why is this my fault? Why am I in this
right.
situation?
Like, take your cat with you or put it in
Yeah.
whatever cage or
Yeah.
anything, but no, that's stupid. No, because I think any houses, you're looking at the doors, you're leaving them open,
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
kidding me? Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
so stupid.
Yeah. And like I always try to when I walk into a house, I try to lock the front door behind me just again for like safety purposes because you never know like someone could see that the door's open and walk right in or
Right.
be like, "Oh, I'm just checking out the house. I don't have an agent." And it's like, "Well, it doesn't work
You have to
like
have
that."
one, right? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So going off of that, what would you say is the hardest part about being a real estate agent?
Hmm.
Long
I
sigh.
think yeah. Where do I begin?
Right.
No, so I think for me, I guess it was just like an adjustment for me going
Sure.
from a typical 9 to 5 to really running your own business because that's kind of what you are.
Oh,
Like
for
you
sure.
are a business owner, you're starting your own business, you are responsible for, all of your clients. So I think for me is like a lot of people get into real estate thinking that like, oh, you're your own business, you're your own boss, like you can create your own schedule. And like that's true in, a sense, but really your clients do kind of dictate your schedule because you might get a text on, Friday night, hey, 5 o'clock. Love this house. Got to go see it that night or the next morning. So just kind of adjusting to the switch up in schedule where every day is very different. Like
Mhm.
it's awesome because every day is different, and you don't know what to expect the next day. It can be exciting, but it also can just like I kind of had to adjust to that where it's like, okay, every day is different. I don't know what to expect, and you're kind of planning your days in like 2-day increments.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
What advice would you give? Because I know a few people that got their real estate license that do listen to this podcast, but what
Hmm.
advice would you give to people that are just starting out?
Good question. I've had a lot of people like come to me like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting my license. Like what has your experience been like?" And to be honest with you, I don't feel like I was fully prepared. You can never fully prepare someone
Oh,
right for
never.
like a new
Right.
job, but I think the biggest thing for me is I really try to prepare people that like I just said, are your own business owner. Like
Right.
you are running your
Mhm.
own business. You might not get a paycheck for the first 6 months. Like you're responsible for all of that. And so just kind of mentally preparing them that it can start off pretty slow and you have to work your way up. Like you can't just walk into a $1.5 million house and be like, I'm gonna sell this, like some people do, like some people really do that, but it kind of all depends on like your sphere of influence, like who, what kind of crowd you run with, who your friends are,
Right.
who you influence, all of that. But just kind of mentally preparing them that like it can be difficult starting out because you don't just get your license and magically have listings and clients. You really have to work for it. You're running it yourself. So
Right.
like if you can try to maybe hang on to like a part-time position so you at least have like a paycheck coming in.
Mhm.
Luckily I was married, and so I had my husband's like full sun support. You got this, girl. So that was such a blessing. um but it can take a while just to kind of get things rolling, but once you see the growth, it does get really exciting.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Now, what would you say? Because everyone, I feel like, has an opinion. Like people have opinions about what you should do to look for a job, but what you should do with real estate. Do you have any examples of good sources of information? Adobe, I love your social media is amazing, but what are some other good sources of information for market updates or anything people may have questions on?
Yeah. So, yeah, like you mentioned, the brokerage I work for on Instagram, it's at We Are Doby. They put out weekly market updates. So they give the stats on what is newly listed, pending, and sold in Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne County. And I repost those a lot, so you're welcome to follow me as well.
Amazing.
And those are just really good, stats to kind of keep an eye on if you're local to the area.
Mhm.
But one Instagram account that I really like, it's called Keeping Current Matters.
Okay.
They post a lot of stuff about even nationwide, like different market stats, different insights. It's a really educational, not only for real estate agents, but for the general public as
Mhm.
well, just kind of giving you insights into the market and what's happening in real estate.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. Now, I want to hear this, but what has been your worst client story? I always love asking people horror stories because I just love hearing them. But what has been a bad client experience? Or I just love this, and every industry has something different. But tell us a client
Yeah.
horror story.
Uh, so, all right, I'll be careful here because I don't like to bad talk or
Oh
bad mouth
no,
my
it's
clients, but
right, of course.
so this one, I had a lady reach out to me about selling her condo. She was a
Okay.
super nice lady. She wanted to sell her condo and move to the west side to be closer to her kids. So I was like, great. We set up the appointment. The morning of, she messages me and she's like, hey, looking forward to our meeting. But FYI, I have two dogs and one of them she's like my security alarm. She just like barks like crazy. She's going to be in your face. It was like, I don't know, a 7-pound Yorkie. Like it's a tiny little dog, but definitely a
Right.
firecracker. So I'm like, no problem. I love dogs. Not an issue.
Right.
So I
Mhm.
go over there. As promised, her little dog was just yapping away.
Ugh.
And she's walking me through the house, and we're walking, I don't know, from like the hallway into the kitchen. And I'm following this woman, and this dog is jumping on me and barking. This dog bites my ankle. I
Oh,
have never been bitten by a dog before. And it's not like it was, a Rottweiler biting me, like a
right.
big dog.
But
But I
still.
was like, oh my gosh. And I like exclaimed, and she looks back at me, and all she sees is the dog jumping on me. And she's like, yelling at the dog, get down, all this stuff. And I'm like sitting there, we're going over the info. I'm sitting at the table, like trying to check out, see if I'm bleeding, like what's going on.
Right, exactly.
And so I get back in the car, I call my broker. I'm like, I was just at this listing appointment and this lady's dog bit me. Like, what do I do? And he's
Right.
like, did you tell her? And I'm like, no, I wanted to get the listing. Like, I didn't want to make her feel bad. So luckily no blood was drawn. Otherwise, I definitely would have reached out and
Right.
made sure that the dog was up on his rabies shot, but I'm rabies free.
I'm
It was a
so
little
happy for
painful for
you.
a couple days, but yeah, that was my first experience of getting bit by a dog, but then getting bit by a dog in the work environment.
That's so well, it's like if she knew this already, why would you not just like throw the dog in a room or just like I
I
sound
know.
heartless, but I don't know.
Well, and it was funny because the other dog was just like chilling on the bed, like totally
Right.
fine, and then this other one's just yapping away, biting my ankles, and it like that's the thing. It wasn't like a nip; it was an actual bite. Like my ankle was bruised, and I'm like,
You got
okay.
the listing though? Did you sell her condo?
Yep, yep.
Okay,
So
good.
I was like, I'm never gonna tell her.
So she's gonna listen to this and be like, "What? I had no idea." No.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry.
So sorry, right? Now, as we start to wrap this up, what makes you really different from other agents? Because I feel like everyone knows 10 different agents that do real
Right.
estate. Why are you different than others?
Yeah. So I do find this question interesting because everyone does know 10 different agents, like my
Yes.
uncle and my cousin and my high school friend. And like I could say that like my marketing is the best, or my social media is the best, but
Right.
I think like how I would respond to that question is my approach with my clients. So, I mean, real estate is very relationship based, very
For
people
sure.
oriented. I know you experience the same thing. You work with all kinds of different characters, and that's just
Yep.
like the nature of working in a people business. So for me, when I'm like approaching a new client orientation, whether it be a buyer, seller, investor, I really try to hone in on like our relationship, building that and trying to figure out like who this person is and how they tick. Like working with someone that works like is an engineer compared
Hmm.
to a lawyer, like two very different type of people, different brains, like they just work differently. And so what I try to do is hone in on that, and for all my clients provide the same level of service, but really creating the process and adjusting it to their needs and how they best see information, process information, take it in, like what's going to work best for you. And I've had really good success with that. Like it's really catering to the individual person themselves, because like when you buy or sell a house, that's pretty much the biggest financial decision you're going to make for most people. And I want to make sure that they are comfortable with the process. They feel like they know what's going on. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients tell me, like, oh, yeah, when I bought my last house, like, it was such a whirlwind. I don't even know what happened. And like,
Oh,
that
that's not good.
breaks my heart. Like, I want to make sure that they walk away from the closing table. You start day one seeing this house, and 35 days later, you're a homeowner, right? So, like,
Right.
making sure they know what the heck just happened, why all of this happened, right? And they're educated on the process and walking away feeling, confident in the process too. So,
That's amazing. Okay. And last but not least, if someone wants to work with you that's listening to the podcast, how do they contact you? Where can they follow you? Tell us about that.
yeah. So you can reach out to me if you want to follow me on Instagram. My account is abby.center.realestate, ABBY, and my last name is Center, like shopping center.
Easy.
um, and all of my contact info is there. So, my phone number and email. My email is abby@wearedoby. You can also find me on my brokerage website, wearedoby.com. I would love to chat with you. Yeah, if you are buyer, seller, investor, I work with all three, and I would be happy to have a conversation with you.
Amazing. Abby, thank you so, so, so much for being on this and providing all of your amazing insight. If you guys listening want to work with Abby, all of the links are in the bio of this site, and we'll see you next week.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.